what have we said so far? Every ethical problem has a context, and every ethical problem has a person behind it. Even in theology, whenever you read theologians, here's an open secret. Read about their lives. Because once you understand their lives, you get a clue as to why they write in a certain way and why they are writing why they are emphasizing a particular issue. You understand their context, their history, their personality, and you can sort of appreciate their theology a bit more. For example, Karl Barth. Who's Karl Barth? One of the greatest theologians in the 20th century. He rejected liberal theology. Now, why would anyone reject liberal theology? He was raised on it. Why did he reject it? Well, because he was smack in World War II, the bombs were dropping, and he began to realize that a lot of the things that he was taught did not make sense or did not really work as a pastor in a pulpit. So he changed his theology and it became known as neo-orthodoxy. So there's a personal element to even how theologians think. What else? Well, we all deal with ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas. We've talked about two broad families and categories of ethical decisions. The first one is what? The absolutist versus the relativist. Okay? Example, divine command. What else? Deontological. In other words, there's very little room for maneuvering. They tend to be quite rigid. Divine command means do good no matter what. Right? Deontological, if murder is wrong, it is wrong in all circumstances. Then you have the ones that lean more to the relativist side. What are they?
Situational ethics.
Situational. What else? Teleological. Very good. And we all saw the shortcomings of those very popular positions. I mentioned to you also a variant, an attempt to try to be a lot more biblical. What is that? Do you all remember the name of the ethical position? Prima facie. P-R-I-M-A.
Oh, prima facie. That's right.
Of course, it's pronounced in different ways. Lawyers pronounce it in one way, others pronounce this Latin word in a different way. Okay? Prima facie. What is that? On the face of it, it comes from Catholic moral theology that says that when you look at something, if it's bad, it is probably bad. If it's evil, it probably is evil. But in real life, you have conflicting values and contradictory values coming together. So for example, you have, what is it? The Hebrew midwives who lie. Is lying wrong? Yes. But if they don't lie, they will get killed. Right? So in life, you have competing moral values that clash together. So this position says, for them to lie is wrong. And it is always wrong. But given this, it's still the better one to do. The Protestants have tried to rival this theory by creating one of their own. Norman Geisler, some of you may know that name, came up with one. It's known as hierarchicalism. Hierarchicalism. Just write hierarchy with an ism at the back of it. Right? Hierarchicalism, meaning what? There are a hierarchy of values, meaning if you have two competing moral values like do not lie, do not murder, coming together, prioritize the higher one. So when he talks about the Hebrew midwives lying, he would say death and life is the higher value. So you want to preserve the higher value by surrendering the lower one, which is what? Do not lie. But of course, that position has come under severe criticism because when you have other values, who determines which one is higher, which one is lower? But these are the two that have been attempts to try to make ethics a lot more biblical, right? So, at least you're aware of those. Prima facie, facie, and hierarchicalism. Now, I think it was last year, someone asked this question in class. And let me ask you the same question. This man was asking, is it alright to lie to my wife about me throwing her a birthday party? I want to throw her a birthday party, but I have to lie to her, right? Is it okay for me to lie to her? Okay. How many of you would say that it is alright to lie? Man, you a relativist. How many of you would say that it is not alright to lie? Okay. One leaning more to divine command. Man. This is the future of our church in San Diego. Ooh. Why? For those who said it's okay to lie, why do you say so?
Depends if the lie would be harmful or it would be something she would like, something you were surprised with.
She was adamant. She said, over the years, I don't want any surprise birthday party, no matter what. Do you get that?
Well, that's a new nuance.
I'm sorry, you said that if it harms her, don't do it.
Yeah, she doesn't like that, don't do it.
Okay. Anyone else?
With that nuance, then I changed my position.
Oh, okay. So you do depend on the circumstances to some extent, right? Yes, at the back.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Isn't there a commandment that says thou should not lie?
Do you believe it? It's one of the big 10.
That's what I thought. So, I mean, if it's a commandment, thou should not lie.
So if your wife says,
Don't ask. Don't ask. Don't ask. Don't. I'm serious. That's the lesser of two evils.
okay, because God you cannot see, but the God at home you can. Right? So some of you say yes, some of you say no, but it sounds like many of you are a lot more flexible. You lean more to, it's alright, white lies are fine as long as they don't cross the I harm you line. Right? But for you, you would be a deontologist. You would have to be. Okay. So you see two different positions, right? Now, what about another position, another situation? Someone asked in class, I know this friend whose husband is cheating on her. Should I say anything to her? Because if I do say anything to her, she would crumble, she may not recover. Would you share this information with your friend? These things are real, right? Ethics and morality issues are real. How many of you would share what you know? Half of you? How many of you would not share? More hesitation there, right? Okay, that is why on Thursday we will talk a little bit more about human nature. Right? Human nature. We'll cover a lot more of these things. But for now, we will say a few things. Okay? Whether it is alright to lie to your wife about an upcoming birthday, even though he knew that every time he did it, I asked him more questions. She would be blessed at the end of it. Every time he showed her, he did for her a surprise birthday party. Right? So he knew she would be blessed and intuitively knew that it was okay to lie in that situation. When I asked him to justify it, he couldn't really. See, that leans a little bit towards virtue ethics. It's who he is more than following the rights and the wrongs. Okay? Now, we're not even saying whether it is right or wrong. Okay? We're just posing that. But what are the assumptions here? Let's take that simple situation and deconstruct it at its lower levels, and what will we discover? There are times, no, very often, look at yourself, look at the people around you. We all have different psychological states of mind, different vulnerabilities, different histories, different weaknesses, different capacities to handle news, different capacities to cope. I can give the same information to two different persons. One will collapse, another one will grow stronger. What's the difference? Our anthropology. Our different anthropology. Any ethics that does not take our basic anthropology or human nature, inherited history into consideration, will simply fall into the quandary ethics problem, which is look at only rights and wrongs without looking at a person. Alright? So, for example, take 2 or 3 persons. One person's apparatus, heart, mental, or will apparatus for making decisions may be a little bit more diminished than another person. Why? Because maybe this person suffered more growing up, and therefore they have a more vulnerable decision-making apparatus in their lives. Because this person has been through a disproportionate amount of suffering. Or this person may have been through, what do you call it? Maybe even in their DNA, they are a lot more fragile. You have to admit, you meet people like that too, right? Some people grow up believing that they should not deserve, they do not deserve attention from others, like this man's wife, who I gave you the example of earlier. She believes that attention must never be given to me, and what the husband thought was, no, you deserve it because you're a child of God, I want to bless you. But that's what she grew up with, and he knew that. Right? He believed that she grew up in a very constraining culture that did not allow her self-identity to flourish in a healthy way. So any attention drawn to her, she would see as something really bad. So he wanted to do something good for her. Right? Because for him, it was not so much just the rightness, the wrongness. It was looking at her history, knowing who she was, her vulnerability points, and how he could complement a weakness in her life. See, everything changes now, doesn't it? Right? It's not a right and wrong anymore. But again, we're not justifying right and wrong. We're merely trying to understand. That's it. Yeah. Okay? In a fallen and finite world, we do not always know, even for ourselves, what brings out God's best in us. God seems to know. That is why trial levels are different for each person. Right? Because God seems to know these things. Why is it we don't get afflicted with the same trial? In fact, we have designer trials in a way. Right? For each one of us. It feels that way. Why is it the people around me don't get the tough ones? I get all the tough ones. As someone said, well, because you must be God's best student.
Yeah.
Right? So bottom line, for some, if they know that somebody else has a diminished capacity to respond to truth, for some, if you tell them the truth, you will cause them to collapse. Is that morally responsible? If you knew that. See, that's the question, isn't it? Is that morally responsible of you to know that if you shared something with someone, in your mind it's deontological or divine command, but wait a second. If that is the ultimate guide, your ultimate guide is a set of rules, right? So, in such circumstances, where at least we were talking about that particular situation, using biblical reasons, we can justifiably override their diminished capacities if we are certain, and only if we are certain that we know better, In fact, parents do this all the time. For example, a child may be abandoned by his or her father or her mother, and then the child will ask the mother, Did father abandon me because I'm not worthy or because I'm bad? What will the loving mother say? Of course not, no matter what. Even if the child was really a financial nuisance, the mother will lie to the child because the mother knows that the child cannot handle a certain amount of rejection at that early age. In fact, for the mother to say, you know what, I am a deontologist. Your dad ran away because you're just too much to handle, you cry too much, you're absolutely irritating, and that's why he left. Would you consider that a morally responsible mother? See how things change so fast because of context, right? So, that's why anthropology is so critical in understanding ethics. Remember, many of us are still, I know at this point, caught up with rights and wrongs. As we said, that is a very social, historical, geo-historically inherited idea. Simply by living in America, that is going to be your default thinking. Rights and wrongs. But ethics is more than that. You cannot separate the person from the rights and the wrongs. We become actually even morally irresponsible if we separate it. Okay? What else? Sometimes God overrides even our cause of action. Like Saul on the road to Damascus, he was assaulting, killing, and destroying Christians. God would sometimes step in the way to stop things, right? Sometimes we stop, but of course God has a better way of doing it. So, the question is this. Some folks, when they hear certain truth, they will commit suicide. Right? We know of that too. Why? Because they are more fragile, or maybe in a certain time in their lives, they are more vulnerable. Then if I change that and said, would you tell this person the truth if you knew they were going to commit suicide? How would you respond? Now that changes everything. The whole equation changes because the question changed. We put forward a new context. Which means what? Context matters more than we realize. It's always good to ask what is really going on, the first responsibility of any ethicist. What is really going on even before we respond? So that's why I've been throwing you trick questions. How would you respond? Your answer, hopefully by the end of next week, would be, tell me more. Tell me what's really going on, give me background. Let me know what's really going on. Okay? Yes?
On this issue of lying, I know that most of our feelings about it come from Exodus 20:16, the 8th commandment. And doesn't that have a legal context in mind though when it says that? I mean, bearing false witness sounds kind of like a legal context, not a personal person-to-person kind of a situation. So if that's the case, then does it really have no kind of bearing on personal interaction in these other situations?
Yeah, let's begin just like Proverbs, okay, 10 to 15 and then 15 and 20. So take the issue of lying as an ethical issue. There's a great book by Francis Fukuyama, a political theorist, who writes about what happens when cultures lie. Commerce, economics, trade, finance all collapses. Because you need to have a culture and a society where people trust one another and where people don't lie, right? So we know that there is a place for telling the truth. Now, that is in the economic dimension, right? What you brought up is the civil dimension in Exodus. That is how the culture is to be run. Remember, what's the larger context? We have a group of people coming out of Egypt who do not have a set of egalitarian moralities because there was no sense of fairness at all. In Egypt, they were the underclass. So now that they are coming out, we have 10 commandments to help them order themselves and order a society. So yes, there is that civil perspective, but then out of that comes the third one, which is the legal perspective, which is where we see in law. I mean, there's something called perjury, right? So there is a legal dimension, there is a civil dimension, there is an economic dimension, but now we are moving into a new context, which is what? An interpersonal dimension. Now, so depending on how we apply that same truth in Exodus, as you said, the 8th commandment, we have to ask, what dimension are we applying it? You know, in the first 2 classes, we talked about dimensions. Being very aware of dimensions. As I mentioned to you, another example. When you steal something from 7-Eleven, you get caught, you sent to the police station. But if your parent catches you stealing, will they send you to prison? Right? What changed? The context. Context sort of reshapes everything because law is governed by managing a society and keeping people, the worst among us, on track. At the home, that's not what's governing the home. What's governing the home is my relationship as a parent with my child. That is my governing telos. That is my governing structure. So things begin to look different in that context compared to an economic one, compared to a legal one. Does that sort of make sense? Oh, okay. Any other questions? Yes?
This question kind of relates to that too, because you're using the word context. That makes
Right.
perfect sense to me. However,
Okay.
I need a clear demarcation between virtue ethics, which is about who you are, and situation ethics, which suggests to do the loving thing.
Right.
So I'm thinking, I need a clear distinction between virtue, because if it's just based on who you are, aren't they considering, like the man with the surprise party, the context?
Very good question.
And that he's loving, how is that not considering situation and context?
Very good question. In fact, these are the questions you should be asking and pressing, because in your question, it sounds like you are worried about a rampant relativism going on, because it sounds like, right, it could be anything now. You could feel like this is okay for me to lie in this and it's all right. Where is that line? Okay, we will get to that in half an hour. When we deal with virtue, virtue ethics is very substantially different from situational ethics. Okay, we will get to that very specifically. Any other questions so far? Again, this is a summary of what we've learned so far, but I'm trying to bring new illustrations here. Any other questions? These are very good questions. Okay, what else? As we said, context do matter because different people from the same environment can respond differently to a similar situation. Right? Good people can respond to the same situation and act in a very evil way, and those who are so-called evil can act in good ways. In fact, Jesus also recognized those who have stronger capacities to deal with right and wrong, and even the weaker ones. He said, "Woe to those of you who cause the weaker ones to sin. Some cannot handle certain things. Some can." And in Corinthians, remember, some can worship and eat food offered to idols. Not worship, but eat food offered to idols. What was Paul's argument? You can because your conscience is bigger. It's fine. But be careful of those whose consciences are weaker than your stronger one. So it wasn't an issue of right and wrong. It was an issue of, can those guys handle it? Right? See the difference? So there is even a recognition of those with weaker versus those who are stronger. What else? That is why we come back again. You know, when we talked about the lying thing, think of that, and we talked about the economics dimension, the civil dimension, the legal dimension. Think of that as Proverbs chapter 10 to 15. And now when you deal with personal ethics, right? Those, for example, the person you're not sure whether to tell them the truth. If you told them the truth, they would commit suicide. Now that's a bit different. So that would be Proverbs chapter 16 to 20. Right? So what governs the two? Wisdom. That's why I keep coming back to that one, because as I said before, I don't see a whole lot of wisdom in many of the textbooks we read. So I want to put forward that to all of you, at least as a biblical frame, with a biblical framework. Why is that? Because the wisdom category believes in absolutes. Right? And maybe I've not drawn this out more, but maybe I should. The doctrine of creation, right, versus the doctrine of the fall. What's the doctrine of creation? The doctrine of creation, conservatives, fundamentalists love this one, because creation is all about order in the world. There is a certain order in the world because God made the world, He made it good. Right? So relationships, whatever it is, society ought to follow a certain standard of rightness. And the rest of the Old Testament also gives us what some of these standards are, right? So conservatives and fundamentalists on the one extreme end would say, of course we have standards. We must have standards, and I think all of us agree there must be standards. But that's only half the picture. We are talking as if the fall never existed. What happens to the fall? Once we have the fall, everything goes haywire. Now the question is, how fallen are we? Are you a 5-point Calvinist? Are you totally depraved? Or are you partial? Some would argue that you're so totally depraved that you cannot even receive Jesus with your will, because you can't even think straight. Right? So one can debate about the level of depravity that you have. But the point is, the larger point is, we are depraved. Now, some only limit depravity to our moral condition, but as we're coming to that on Thursday, I want to argue that depravity stretches to more things, to creation, to our genetics, to the things that we inherit, the sicknesses we inherit, right? The brokenness we inherit, the psychological brokenness we also inherit. These things are real. So if you believe in the fall, right, you have to take into account all of this brokenness, put them side by side, and try to deal with both of them dialectically. So we could be a liberal, a hardcore liberal, and look at the fall and say, oh, it's all out for grabs. No more order in the world. Or you could say there is order, but the order is a bit fuzzy. It is a little bit unclear at times. And the question is, how do we redeem both? That is the question, through Christ, isn't it? So, having said that, wow, time is passing so quickly. Let's see. Okay, before virtue ethics, I want to talk a little bit about common grace morality, because some have sort of pointed to that. We call natural law ethics common grace morality. What is that? Well, let's be clear. Other religions also teach us how to be good. There's something known as Gandhian ethics. There is Buddhist ethics, right? There are Hindu ethics. What's the Christian contribution to all of that? What's the Christian contribution to all of that? Let me give you Aristotle's famous doctrine of the mean that will come up for your exam. Why? Because Christianity, to a great extent, has been influenced by Aristotle. You wouldn't have systematic theology without Aristotle, the great systematizer. So, even in Greek society, how did society or families or the little cultures within the culture determine what was morally good for the populace or for the family? Well, they followed Aristotle's doctrine of the mean. What is the mean? For those of you who have done mathematics, it's your average. It's your middle point, right? You don't want something too far left, something too far right. You want something in the middle. So what is it? So let's take a look. It's in your notes. Let's just say, Aristotle would argue, you're trying to figure out what kind of person should I be, because At times I'm fearful, at times I'm overconfident. What's the best kind of habit or disposition to cultivate? Answer, what's the vice of excess? Being rash. Being a rash person, making hasty decisions. What is the vice of deficiency? Being a coward. You see the difference between the two? So what's the mean? Being a courageous person. And so instead of overconfidence and having fear, being motivated by fear, be a courageous person. So parents would teach their children to be courageous. Does it make sense? These are virtues to cultivate. Every school kid would grow up and, if they didn't know what to do, they'll be reminded, okay, what's the brave thing to do? And by the way, when we are talking of Aristotle's virtues, it's very different from what we understand today. Because back then, why be courageous? Because courageous family members protect one another. Courageous citizens stand up and fight in wars. Today, when we hear the word courageous, we think of individual soldiers, wrestlers, superheroes, mostly from an individual perspective. Okay? So it's very different. We are talking of a social context where we believe we ought to be courageous. What about another example? I won't go through all of them, but pleasure or pain. On the one hand, the Epicureans say, oh, pleasure, right? Another group, what do we call them? I don't know if they existed back then, the masochistic ones, whatever you want to call them. So rather than be licentious, which is an extreme, go for it all, have whatever you want to have. I deny myself, nothing my eyes desire, right, as Solomon says. Or insensibility, both are problematic. So what do we have? Temperance. Temperance is the virtue of restraint, but still knows how to enjoy. You are not led by emotions. Your emotions are left to move, but you put a restraint at the right time. So, I like this one. I love the Greeks. They covered everything. What about conversation? Some of us may ask, should I be the charismatic kind of person, animated sort of person, or should I be the philosopher? The one who is always reflecting on life. Well, the Greek culture had an ideal. Instead of buffoonery, right, being a joker, that's an excess. Or boorishness on the other hand, boorishness meaning what? An absolute bore. What's the answer? Be witty. I like that. The Greeks were really onto something. Be witty. We have something to learn, don't we? So you can use this and teach this to your kids. It works, okay? It's really good. If you don't have any guidelines for child rearing, this is a good one. So that's the Greek. Okay, that's coming from the Greek perspective. But look, even in the Southeast Asian context, in Asia, they have their own set of wisdom. Confucius, the sage. Let me give you one example. One of his disciples came up to him and asked him, Confucius, the real Confucius doesn't talk like a fortune cookie, okay? I know some of you may see the fortune cookies, but he says a lot more good stuff. So one of his disciples comes to him and says, I don't get it. You say, rather than give it the names, Chinese names, I won't. He says, I don't get you. Because you say that disciple A excels your straightforwardness. He's better than you, Confucius. Why do you say that? Disciple B, you say that he is more courageous than you. Disciple 3, he is more dignified than you. The fourth one, he is more clarified. He clarifies things better than you. And Confucius says, yeah, that is true. One is more dignified, one clarifies things better than myself. One is more dignified, one is more courageous. So, if those things are true about your disciples, one question, why are they your disciples? And Confucius responds, true, disciple A is straightforward, but he does not know how to be flexible. Disciple B knows how to clarify things, but he doesn't know how to give a simple yes and no answer. Disciple C is courageous, but he doesn't know how to be cautious. Disciple 4 knows how to be dignified, but he doesn't know how to be modest. That's why they are my disciples. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Now, what do we call these? Some people say, oh, is it okay to learn from all of these different religions? I say absolutely yes. Why? If you believe God made everything and reflects His goodness to the world, why would you not say that these things cannot come from God Himself? He just reflects these truths in different ways. So, I could give you others, but we don't have time. I can give you Islamic ones too. Alright? But the bottom line is this. In common grace ethic, it levels the playing field at the common grace level. Okay? At the common grace level. The problem is for many Christians, they don't even compete at this level. Learning from other philosophies and other faiths, sometimes we look silly when we say, we are the only ones who know what real morality is. Right? So, what's the Christian perspective in a nutshell? What's the Christian perspective in a nutshell? Well, Christianity, even in the Bible, it's full of common grace ethic. Rather than the negative, do not do unto others as you do not want them to do unto you, there's a positivized one. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, I would only wish that folks in the church, if they don't know what to do, if they only begin with that one, I would be so happy. Just start with that one if they can't start anywhere else. Don't do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. But that's common grace ethic, right? But let's now move into more Christian nuances. What are the nuances that takes us beyond common grace? Well, Romans chapter 7 tells us what? Where Paul says, you know, these good things that I know I'm supposed to do, I can't even do them. The evil I know I'm not supposed to do, I end up doing them. Why? Because the Bible recognizes a flawed anthropology, a fallen anthropology. So simply laying out what is right and wrong doesn't mean I can even do them. Thirdly, the Sermon on the Mount. We could spend a whole week on that, but in a nutshell, okay? In a nutshell. Many have tried to interpret the Sermon on the Mount. You have so many different interpretations. The best one I have read is by this German Jewish scholar, Joachim Jeremias. Okay, you can find it online. What does he teach about the Sermon on the Mount? Simple. The Sermon on the Mount, you know the standards, you know, look lustfully at a girl, that's adultery, hate someone, that's murder. He makes a very compelling argument, given the style and the language, that unlike other positions that say that as a Christian, that's how you're supposed to live, other Christians, the Lutherans, would say, no, you're not supposed to live that, it's merely supposed to reveal your inability to follow them. There are many positions, right? His is a very good one. He makes a distinction between didache, meaning teaching, versus proclamation. This writing in Matthew chapter 5 to 7 is a didache, is a teaching, meaning what? The Sermon on the Mount is a set of behaviors meant to show those who are already Christians what they are capable of. But only if grace is real to them. Okay?
Say it again.
The Sermon on the Mount is designed as a teaching tool to reflect and showcase what the Christian is capable of if and only if they have been transformed by grace. So that's the condition. No grace, forget it. Don't even bother. Alright? One of the most consistent, best exegesis I've seen on that text. Right? In other words, this is what you are capable of. Really? So it's not a demand on my life. No, it is not a demand on your life because you can't. So to that extent, the Lutherans are right. But for others who are like, The Methodists, right? They look at it, Christian perfectionism and all of that. That's what it's supposed to be. Well, not quite. Apart from grace, you can do that. So it is what you are capable of if God has transformed your life. That's where you can. That's a picture of who you can become. Okay? So you see the progression so far. Yes, we have common grace. We have a very good evaluation of our ability to do that. Romans 7. Can you do it? Chances are maybe not. So we have a higher ethic, but not all of us can reach it. What else? Okay, let me use and close with this example, because some have asked this question. Do those who are not Christians, outsiders, do they have higher and better moralities than Christians? What's your question? What's your response?
The church is for the sick.
The church is for the sick. What else?
We're all sick.
We're all sick. Anyone well here? What else? So, you wouldn't dare to rival Christian morality with other moralities out there?
No, I would. I mean, it's possible.
Say again?
It's possible. Morality, I mean, it's a part of common grace. So
Okay, right. So, in other words, we stand on equal ground. Is there anything you can put forward to the conversation that shows that, wait, there is something more here than just common grace morality? That's why we call it common grace morality, right? There is no special grace morality. That's what we want to move towards. So, here's a way, or hopefully a way out. When we talk about love, I know of my non-Christian friends who love better than I do. We all do. So, let's be wise and just admit reality, okay? We find folks out there who behave better than we do? So, let me give you 3 categories of grace. Love. First one, self-interested love. Second one, common grace love. The third one, special grace love. Okay? 3 kinds. What's the first kind? The first kind is the one I think all religions would frown on, but Christians also struggle with. What is that? What is natural self-interested love? That's utilitarian love. I love in order to be respected. I love in order to gain something. Many Christians still believe that. I love others to gain something. In other words, or to put it another way, I love in order to prove that I deserve to be loved. God, I'm loving so that I prove to you that I deserve to be loved by you. Believe it or not, that's the lowest kind of love. Okay? That's utilitarian love. We give love to get love. So that's the first kind. Now, hopefully Christians can even realize that, that's not the best sort. Many in other religions can also recognize, that's not really love. Okay, then let's move up the hierarchy. Common grace love. What is common grace love at its best, right? It is the ability to love sacrificially. Okay, so let's respond to that question. Here is one response, because I do believe in special grace. Okay? Imagine that there are 2 persons over here. And they are both hungry and they are both poor. Person A and person B. So I decide to give person A $100. Buy the best food you can this week. Feed yourself. See what comes out of however you spend the money in 1 week's time. And here's the second person, a Christian. And I say to this person, I'll give you $1,000. Buy anything you want because it's yours. Okay? Okay. So maybe here you have an atheist, a person who doesn't believe in God. And this person, what does this person do? Spends $100 in going to the 99-cent store, whatever it is, and buying the best food. After 1 week, this person looks pretty good. Right? The other person, I gave this second person, the Christian, $1,000. What's the result? This person only spent $25. This person spent $25 going to Vaughn's, which is more expensive, right? Buying less stuff and looking famished, still hungry, and still looking so bad. What's the difference between the two? Here, with common grace, this person has maxed out common grace. This person who is given so much more has only consumed and received so little. It's not the quality of the gift, it's the quality of the reception. Does it make sense? So, I mean, for those in my church, I suppose, I would congratulate the person who's outside for taking advantage of whatever has been revealed. But for the Christian, I would say, you have so much given to you. Why do you take so little advantage of it? Why are you not making the best of it? And very often, I think that's how I would frame it. So, what then is special grace love? Special grace love is the ability to love beyond our limits in all areas of life. It applies to all relationships, because for me to just say, to limit it to one area, we all have different strengths in how we love. Some of us love strangers more than others. Some of us love our spouses more than others, whatever it is. So some of us hit the wall. Special grace is the ability to break through those walls supernaturally. And that is what I believe the Bible offers us, which is you can do it, with my grace you can. The qualifier is what? You can't. But with grace, God's grace, you can. Right? One is natural, the other one is supernatural. So that's the distinction that I would make. Now, with the remaining minutes, let's move to virtue ethics. Not possible, but we'll try. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Yes?
I can understand that the examples that you gave us for the common grace within the atheist and the Christian. But going back to some of the things that we talked about and you mentioned, would that also depend, maybe it all depend on the background and the anthropology aspect of the Christian thinking that he don't want to spend all that, maybe share with others. You know?
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. Because the reason why many, using this same example, why many Christians don't take more is, number one, they don't know that so much has been offered. Or number two, they don't know how to receive it. Right? I mean, there are many reasons why, but I think those are the biggest ones. Because grace is threatening. Grace is what? As we said, grace is recognizing that you are more wicked than you ever thought possible, and simultaneously realizing that you are more loved than you ever dreamed possible. Those two must come together, and for many Christians, it's hard. Right? It's very difficult. The amount of surrendering is a lot. So, any other questions?